Hi everyone. In this video I want to talk about something quite surprising that I've discovered on my manifesting journey. When I first learned about these teachings, I thought that it was all about controlling my thoughts. I thought that I was supposed to get very clear about what it is that I want and be very specific and then not waver at all from that and be absolutely determined to achieve that and nothing else. But actually, what I've found as I've travelled along this path and learned more about how this works, I've discovered that actually the more rigid you are and the more you insist that things must happen the way your human mind thinks is best, the more things tend to refuse to work out and you end up in this kind of fight with yourself and with reality. You can see that things are going one way and you're trying to convince yourself that you can still have what you want, but meanwhile reality is kind of slapping you in the face and showing you how impossible it is that you will ever get what you want. But when you do the opposite of that and you loosen up and you stop clinging to how your human mind thinks things must go in order for you to get what you want, and you become willing to be flexible and open to things happening in a way that your human mind can't comprehend, then the way things fall into place starts to become magical. It becomes perfect in a way that I can't even begin to explain. It's like you suddenly removed all the barriers that you were holding on to with your limited thinking. And you're allowing this power that knows you really, really well to design and orchestrate and set things up in a way that fulfills your desires so perfectly that you just won't be able to believe it. It's like it knows what your tastes are and what you really, truly want down to the tiniest detail in ways that you didn't even realize yourself. But once those things appear, you can see how perfect they are for you, more perfect than anything you would ever have come up with yourself. That's my experience of how this works. The more you can let go and stop trying to control things with your human logic, and you start trusting in the perfection of the bigger part of you, and you start flowing with everything that shows up instead of fighting against it and trying to make it go the way you think it needs to go, then the more the things you want will just come to you so smoothly, so easily. It happens so much more perfectly than when you're trying to control it yourself. Now, this can be a bit difficult to understand because it seems to contradict the teachings that say that you are the operant power and that you must be mindful of what you assume because that's what creates your reality. But actually, it's not a contradiction. It's a case of understanding what you do need to control and what you don't need to control. Your job is to choose your reality, your desired outcome, what path you are on. But once you have chosen that, let go of the reins. Stop trying to control anything. Let everything be orchestrated for you from that point onwards. Don't try to control what happens. Let yourself be guided rather than trying to control things yourself. It's not so easy to explain this distinction because it's such a subtle thing. It's this feeling of getting to know yourself and always honoring your preference and never feeling like you have to settle for less than what you really want, while at the same time being open to the possibility that your desire can be fulfilled in ways that your human self isn't aware of yet. I guess in a way you can see this as kind of the equivalent of your human self being a young child and your higher self being the equivalent of a very wise and loving parent that the child fully trusts. So it is the child that is noticing what it wants, what its desires are, what its preferences are, and choosing to have those things. The parent isn't imposing its preferences on the child. It leaves the child completely free to choose. However, it doesn't leave the child all alone with no guidance. it will help the child to move towards fulfilling its desires and achieving the things that it wants to achieve in a wholesome way, in ways that are not harmful to itself and to others. And if it sees that the child is aiming at something that is less than what it really wants because the child doesn't know any better, then it will guide the child towards what will truly fulfill it. And because the child trusts the parent and knows that the parent is on its side and has its well-being at heart and isn't doing this to be spiteful or as some kind of punishment, but because it knows that this really will be more fulfilling than what the child thinks, then it happily accepts that guidance. And as a result, it is led to the outcome that is truly best for it. So you need to have the ability to both choose that you get to have what you want, but also being very loose and flexible when it comes to your human logic and how your human mind thinks that things need to go for you to be able to have what you want. You need to learn to flow with everything that shows up and see it all as leading to your desired outcome instead of seeing it as an obstacle or something that is getting in the way and stopping you from having what you want. Because by doing that, you turn any seemingly unwanted thing into a bridge or a stepping stone that ends up taking you where you want to go. There is always, always, always a way for you to have what you want. I think this is the key to understanding this. But it's usually not a way that requires some miracle that your brain can't believe would ever happen, like for something to turn from black into white. It's more a case of loosening your attachment to the outcome having to look the way you think it must look. To give you an example, back when Brexit was happening, I was absolutely adamant that I didn't want the UK to leave the EU. I'm a Maltese citizen living in the UK, and I came here precisely because Malta joined the EU, which gave me freedom of movement and allowed me to come and work in the UK without needing any permits or visas or anything. So when there was this referendum about whether the UK should leave the EU, I was so completely against it. And it was all I could think about. And even when it turned out that the country had voted to leave, I was still so determined that I would manifest that it wouldn't happen. And to some extent, I did manifest that for a while. For those of you who remember, there was stumbling block after stumbling block, making it difficult for the UK to leave. And at one point, it really was looking like maybe it wouldn't happen after all. But then there was that damn election, and that swung it and made it happen. Now, when this happened, at first I was stunned. I was so convinced that Brexit wouldn't happen and that something would come up that would turn things around. But then when it did happen, I had to take a step back. I had to look within myself and work out how to process this. And what I noticed was that my actual desire wasn't really about whether the UK continues to be part of the EU. My real desire was twofold. One was personal. I wanted to continue living in the UK without any problems, enjoying the same rights as I did before. And I also had another desire, which was for there to be unity between the countries of Europe and well-being for the citizens of those countries. And I realized that those things can be achieved regardless of whether the UK is in the EU or not. I had been putting an unnecessary condition in the way and making the fulfillment of my desire dependent on it, when in reality there was no need for that condition. And as it turned out, my personal desire to be able to continue to live here with the same rights worked out very easily. And the one for the well-being of Europeans is an ongoing one, and it's definitely not dependent on the UK being in the EU for it to happen. Now, if I had continued to insist that my desire can only be fulfilled if the UK is part of the EU, then I would probably have continued to fight against those who made the UK leave. And I would have created an outcome that was the opposite of my desire, because I would have created less well-being for myself and less well-being for the people in Europe by fighting against those who were seemingly against me. Whereas this way, by noticing what my real desire was and dropping the insistence that it must happen the way I thought it needed to happen, I allowed the fulfillment of my desire to unfold in a way that wasn't what I thought was best, but has definitely worked out absolutely perfectly despite it not going the way I thought it should. Now, this doesn't mean that you should never get specific with anything. You'd never get anywhere if you did that. You do need to choose your preference according to whatever feels right to you right now, and whatever you feel it is that you want right now, at this point in time. But also, give yourself permission to choose differently at some point in the future, if maybe the situation changes or something comes up that makes you feel like this isn't exactly what you really want anymore, or that you're clinging too tightly to one particular avenue and not allowing in other possibilities. Don't turn it into a failure if things don't manifest the way you thought you wanted them to. Stay with the understanding that there is always a way for your desire to be fulfilled, even if you can't see what that is yet. And if you remain willing to be open and flexible as to how your desire will be fulfilled, and you continue to trust that the source has a way to give you what you want somehow, then things will transform and reshape themselves, and you'll find yourself seeing things from a completely different perspective, because things will evolve in a way that you hadn't even conceived of when you were still clinging to that old reality and that insistence on how things are supposed to go. What you need to get good at is two things. One is noticing how you're feeling and being really honest with yourself about this and about what you're choosing. You might not realize it, but as humans, we have this tendency to deflect blame and responsibility onto the things out there. I feel bad because of that thing or that person, as opposed to, I feel bad because I'm choosing something I don't want, because I'm accepting something I don't like. When you're putting the responsibility on someone or something out there, you're making yourself dependent on whether that external thing or person changes or behaves differently. But when you bring it back to yourself, to the awareness of, this isn't what I want, I'm going to choose something different. Now you're in control. Now it doesn't matter what those things or that person is doing. If they're not behaving in the way that you want, then you can do something about it. You can choose to go somewhere else. You can choose to take some kind of action. You can tell them to stop. And if one thing doesn't work, you can try something else. You're still in charge. It's only when you stop seeing it as your choice that you feel helpless and powerless. So that's one thing. And the other thing is to have that trust in the bigger part of yourself, the one that is creating all of this, the infinite intelligence that is directing, orchestrating everything, absolutely everything in this world. Because once you're aligning with that, you are unstoppable. Nothing can go against you. This is the power that is creating all things. So there is absolutely nothing that can ever beat it. So those are the two things. Train yourself to have a combination of these two things, and life will start to feel pretty amazing, because you'll start to see things just falling into place around you as if by magic. And it really is just such an incredible feeling. So I really do encourage you to practice this and learn to do it, because there's nothing like it. Put your effort into learning these two skills above everything else, and with enough practice, you'll start to feel like the whole world is just constantly forming itself to give you what you want and need every single day. And you'll feel like you have to pinch yourself to check if it's real, because the world will start to conform so easily that you won't quite be able to believe how perfectly and effortlessly it's all happening. It really is a wonderful feeling, and I want you all to experience it. So please do start training yourself to operate in this way, because it really is life-changing. Okay, and on that note, I am going to stop here for today. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, because that allows me to keep doing more of this and to keep creating more videos. Remember that you can ask questions in the comments, or you can come and find me on Facebook or through my website. Thanks once again for your support, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.